The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with the voices of 1,000 different species. Some spoke in clicks, others in musical tones, and many more in languages that required translation devices just to understand. The massive chamber stretched high above her, with seats arranged in circular tiers that rose toward a domed ceiling made of transparent steel. Through it, the stars shone down on the representatives of 300 worlds. Ambassador Zektha of the Vrin Collective sat in his usual place, reviewing trade agreements on his datapad. His blue skin reflected the light from the displays, and his forearms moved quickly through the documents. He barely glanced at the empty seats 3 rows below him. Those seats belonged to the human delegation, and they had been empty for 3 sessions now. Zektha did not think much of it. Humans were quiet. They rarely spoke during council sessions. They never demanded attention or made grand speeches about their accomplishments. In 50 years of council membership, humanity had been like background noise, present but easily ignored. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Horizon's End. The ship was large, built to carry cargo and personnel across vast distances. Today it carried the last group of humans leaving council space. Jake watched through the main viewport as Earth grew smaller behind them. He had served in space for 20 years. He had visited 40 different alien worlds. He had made friends with species that looked nothing like humans. And now he was leaving it all behind. The order had come from Earth 6 months ago. Simple and clear. All humans were to leave council space. No exceptions. "Sir, the last transport just cleared Mars orbit," said Lieutenant Amy Fletcher. She was young, barely 30, with red hair tied back in a regulation bun. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the emotion beneath it. "All human assets in council space are now mobile or abandoned." Jake nodded. He looked at the tactical display showing dozens of human ships moving away from the inner system. Behind them, they left orbital stations, research facilities, and terraforming equipment on 6 different worlds. All of it abandoned. All of it left to the council species who had never bothered to learn how it worked. "Any second thoughts, Lieutenant?" Jake asked. Amy shook her head. "No, sir. We stayed as long as we could. Longer than we should have, maybe." On the council homeworld of Centrum, Administrator Pelanax finally noticed that something was wrong. The Quelni administrator was responsible for maintaining the diplomatic quarter where all species kept their embassies. The human embassy had been quiet for a week. No lights in the windows. No staff coming and going. No responses to communications. Pelanax sent security drones to investigate. The drones found the embassy building completely empty. Every desk cleared. Every computer wiped clean. The power was still on, but barely. In the main entrance hall, a single message displayed on a large screen. "Thank you for the opportunity. Humanity withdraws from Galactic Council participation. We wish you well." That was all. No explanation. No list of complaints. No demands or threats. Just a polite goodbye. Pelanax stared at the message for a long time. Then he contacted his supervisor. Within an hour, the message had reached the council leadership. Councillor Ixvara of the Thend Dominion was in her office when she received the news. She was a tall being, almost 7 feet, with silver skin and large black eyes. She had worked with human diplomats for 15 years. She considered some of them friends. She immediately tried to contact the human diplomatic corps. No response. She tried the human colony on Rigel 4. The communication system reported that no human receivers were active in that system. She tried 6 more human settlements, all silent. Growing worried, Ixvara accessed the colony registration database. What she found made her stand up from her desk in shock. Every human colony in council space showed the same status: evacuated, empty, gone. How is this possible? She whispered to herself. How did they move millions of people without anyone noticing? But even as she asked the question, she knew the answer. Humans had been quiet and efficient. They had been so good at not drawing attention to themselves that no one had watched them closely. They could have been preparing this evacuation for years, and no one would have noticed. Ixvara called for an emergency council session. Within 2 hours, the great hall was filled again. This time, everyone was paying attention. This time, the empty human seats were impossible to ignore. "The humans have left," Ixvara announced to the assembly. "Every human colony, every human ship, every human citizen in council space is gone. They evacuated completely, and they did it without telling anyone." The chamber erupted in confused voices. Species that had barely acknowledged human existence suddenly had 1,000 questions. Where did they go? Why did they leave? When were they coming back? Zektha felt a strange unease in his chest. He pulled up files on his datapad, looking for information about human activities. He found trade reports, maintenance schedules, and scientific papers, hundreds of documents with human names on them. But now that he looked closely, he realized he had never actually read any of them. Surely they left some kind of transition plan, Zekthar said, standing to address the council. Humans are organized. They must have left instructions for maintaining their projects. Ixvara shook her head slowly. I have checked every database they maintained. All empty. Wiped clean. They took their data with them. What about their technology? Another counselor asked. The stations they built, the equipment they operated, all left behind, Ixvara said. But without instructions, without maintenance logs, without any documentation at all. High Chancellor Morthus, the leader of the council, finally spoke. His crystalline body caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns. This is clearly a negotiation tactic. They want something from us. We simply need to determine what it is and open discussions. But Councillor Ixvara was not so sure. She had worked with humans long enough to understand something that others had missed. Humans did not bluff. They did not make empty gestures. If they had left, they had meant to leave, far beyond council space. The human fleet gathered at a rendezvous point near an unremarkable star. Dozens of ships, from massive colony vessels to small family transports, all heading toward the same destination. A new home, a fresh start. On the colony ship New Dawn, Commander Greg Palmer sat in the captain's chair and watched other human ships appear on his sensors. Each one represented thousands of people who had chosen to leave behind everything they had built in council space. Do you think we made the right choice? Asked Dr. Lisa Chen. She was the ship's chief scientist, a small woman with sharp eyes and gray hair. Greg considered the question. We made the only choice we could live with. We spent 50 years being invisible, 50 years of our best people working on their problems, and they never once said thank you. They never once asked our opinion. They never once treated us as equals. But we helped them, Lisa said. We made their lives better. Yes, Greg agreed. And they never noticed. That's the problem. You can't build a relationship with someone who doesn't see you. Back on Centrum, Pelenax stood in the empty human embassy. He walked through the abandoned offices, looking at the empty desks and bare walls. In one room, he found a forgotten coffee mug. It was a simple thing, white ceramic with a faded logo. He picked it up and turned it in his hands. This was real. The humans were really gone. And somehow, Pelenax had the feeling that the galaxy was about to discover just how much it had depended on them. The first problem appeared 3 weeks after the humans left. The quantum communication network that connected most of council space started having delays. Messages that should arrive instantly now took hours. Sometimes they took days. The Vrin Collective controlled the network, and their technicians rushed to fix it. Chief Engineer Kalsith looked at the diagnostic reports and felt growing alarm. The network used old Virin technology, equipment that was nearly 100 years old. According to the maintenance logs, it should have stopped working decades ago. But it had kept running, somehow staying functional long past its expected life. How did this equipment last so long? Kalsith asked his team. A junior technician pulled up the detailed maintenance records. Human crews serviced these stations every 6 months. They replaced components, updated software, and made modifications. Look at this. They rebuilt entire sections using parts that should not even be compatible. Kalsith studied the records in disbelief. The human technicians had been performing miracles of engineering, making ancient equipment work like new. They had done it so quietly that no one had even noticed. And now that they were gone, the network was falling apart. Can we replicate their work? Kalsith asked. The junior technician shook his head. We don't have their documentation. We don't know what modifications they made or how they did it. We would have to figure it out by trial and error, then start figuring it out, Kalsith ordered, but he knew the truth. It would take years to understand what the humans had built, years they did not have. On the agricultural world of Harvest Prime, farmers discovered another problem. The crops were failing, not dying, but producing far less food than expected. The yield had dropped by 40% in a single season. Agronomist Feltak studied the soil samples in confusion. This makes no sense. The soil composition is the same. The weather is optimal. The crops are healthy. They are just producing less. His colleague, a Then scientist named Vernix, found the answer in an old research paper. Look at this. Human researchers developed a soil supplement 15 years ago. It was supposed to be a simple enhancement, but the formula is incredibly complex. It has 237 different compounds. Can we make more of the supplement? Feltak asked. Vernick scrolled through the paper, her face growing darker. The paper provides the list of compounds, but not the exact ratios or the production method. The researchers say those details are in supplementary data files, but those files were stored on human servers, which are now gone. Philtok sat down heavily. Harvest Prime fed 17 worlds. If the crops kept failing, millions of people would face food shortages. In the council chambers, High Chancellor Morthus called another emergency session. The room was packed with worried delegates. Councillor Ixvara presented a report on the growing crisis. We are facing system failures across council space, she said. Communication networks, agricultural production, transportation systems, power grids, all of them are experiencing problems. All of them were maintained or enhanced by human workers. How did we not know about this? Demanded Zeke. He was angry now, mostly at himself. How did humans become so important without anyone noticing? Ixvara pulled up a document on the main display. It was a human research paper about crop enhancement. This is how humans published their work. They filed reports, they documented everything, but they did it in a way that required careful reading to understand. They gave us the fish, but they kept the knowledge of how to catch fish. A delegate from the Quelni hegemony stood up. This sounds like sabotage. They deliberately made us dependent on them. But Ixvara shook her head. No, they made themselves useful. They solved problems that no one else wanted to solve. They took on the boring, difficult, thankless work that kept civilization running, and we let them do it because we did not want to do it ourselves. On the colony ship New Dawn, Commander Greg Palmer monitored the intercepted council transmissions. His communications officer had been tracking the council's broadcasts, watching their growing panic. They are blaming us, said Lieutenant Kyle Rogers. He was young and idealistic, and he sounded hurt. They are saying we sabotaged them. Dr. Lisa Chen laughed bitterly. Of course they are. It is easier than admitting they ignored us for 50 years. Greg leaned back in his chair. Do you remember the infrastructure dependency report? Lisa nodded. Ambassador Daniel Clark wrote it 40 years ago. He warned that humanity was becoming too important to council operations. He recommended training programs and knowledge sharing, and the council marked it as low priority and never read it. Greg finished. We tried to warn them. They did not listen. Kyle looked between them. So this was planned. The evacuation, not planned, Lisa said, but expected. We knew this day might come. When you are taken for granted long enough, eventually you stop trying to prove your worth. You just leave. On Centrum, the weather control system began to fail. The planet housed representatives from dozens of species, each requiring different environmental conditions. The weather control system maintained perfect temperature, humidity, and atmospheric composition for every district. Now, the system was having breakdowns. Some districts were too hot, others were too cold. The Quelni engineers responsible for the system discovered that humans had made thousands of undocumented modifications over the years. They had connected systems that were never designed to work together, creating a complex web of interdependencies without human technicians who understood the whole system. Fixing one problem created three more. Administrator Pelenac stood in the control room, watching the engineers work frantically. How long until you can stabilize it? The lead engineer, a Vrin named Tokovar, did not look up from his console. Weeks, maybe months. The human modifications are brilliant, but we cannot understand them. Every system connects to 5 others. Change one thing, and everything shifts. Pelenax felt a cold weight in his stomach. What happens if we cannot fix it? Then Centrum becomes unlivable for half the species that call it home, Tokovar said simply. The medical crisis was even worse. Hospitals across council space reported that their diagnostic equipment was failing. The equipment could scan patients and collect data, but it could not interpret results for different species. Dr. Felenik, an insectoid physician, discovered the problem in her hospital on the Then homeworld. The translation algorithms are gone, she told her staff. Human doctors developed software that let our scanners work on any species. Without it, we can only diagnose our own people. Her assistant, a young Then named Coralax, looked worried. How many patients rely on cross-species medical care? Dr. Felenix checked the database. The number made her feel sick. Millions. Anyone living away from their homeworld. Anyone in a mixed species colony. Anyone who needs specialized treatment not available from their own species. All of them are at risk. 6 council species sent formal requests for human assistance. The messages were urgent, pleading. They promised rewards, technology exchanges, anything humans wanted. The messages went to the last known human communication relays. No response came back. On the bridge of Horizon's End, Captain Jake Morrison received notification that the human fleet had reached the designated rendezvous point. Over 200 ships, carrying millions of people, all gathered at the edge of known space. All ships report ready for the final jump, said Lieutenant Amy Fletcher. Once we make this jump, we will be beyond Council space, beyond their jurisdiction. Jake looked at the tactical display. Behind them lay Council space, 50 years of human history. Ahead lay empty space, unexplored and unclaimed. Any ships requesting to turn back? Jake asked. Amy checked her console. No, sir. Every ship is ready to proceed. Jake nodded slowly. He opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships. This is Morrison. In 60 seconds, we jump to our new home. There is no going back after this. Anyone with doubts, speak now. He waited. The channel remained silent. Then let us begin again, Jake said. On our terms this time. All ships, jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. The space around the human fleet rippled and twisted. One by one, the ships vanished into faster-than-light travel. Within minutes, the rendezvous point was empty. Back on Serum, Councillor Ixvera stood in her office, looking out at the city below. She could see the weather system failing. Some buildings were covered in ice. Others were shrouded in fog. The perfect climate that everyone had taken for granted was gone. Her datapad chimed with another report. The quantum network was down completely now. 3 agricultural worlds had declared food emergencies. The medical crisis was claiming lives, and somewhere in the dark between stars, humanity was gone. 3 months had passed since humanity left. The Galactic Council was falling apart faster than anyone had imagined possible. What started as inconvenient problems had become full disasters that threatened the stability of dozens of worlds. The then Dominion military made a disturbing discovery. Their fleet, one of the most advanced in Council space, was vulnerable. Commander Vexler was reviewing security reports when she found the problem. The targeting systems on every Then warship were malfunctioning. How is this possible? She demanded of her technical staff. These systems were built by Then engineers. They are our technology. The lead technician, Coronex, pulled up maintenance logs. Yes, Commander, but human software engineers have been updating the security and optimizing performance for 20 years. They found vulnerabilities we never knew existed. They patched them quietly, without fanfare. Vexler felt cold dread. And now those vulnerabilities are exposed again, Coronex said. Any competent hacker can exploit them. The systems are decades behind in security. As if to prove the point, 3 Then warships were hijacked by pirate groups the following week. The pirates took control of the weapons systems remotely and held the ships for ransom. The Dominion was forced to ground its entire fleet until the security problems could be fixed. How long? Vexler asked. Years, Coronex said quietly. The humans made thousands of updates. We have to understand each one, then replicate it. We are essentially rebuilding the entire security system from nothing. On the colony world of New Terra, the first permanent human settlement was growing quickly. Governor Steve Matthews walked through the construction site where robots and human workers were building homes for 100,000 colonists. Thought the planet was beautiful. Blue oceans, green forests, and clean air. No other species had claimed it. No council regulations limited what humans could build. For the first time in 50 years, humanity was building something that belonged only to them. Governor, we have incoming transmissions from Council space, said Communications Officer Jane Morrison. Multiple channels, dozens of messages. Steve returned to the command center and pulled up the messages. They came from different Council species, different governments, different organizations, but they all said the same thing. Come back, we need you. We will give you whatever you want. The offers were impressive on the surface. Full voting rights in the Council, technology sharing agreements, control of entire star systems, formal apologies for past treatment. One message from the Vrin Collective offered to make humanity a founding member species with permanent seats on all major committees. Steve read through them all carefully. Then he deleted them, sir. Jane looked surprised. Should we not at least respond? They still do not understand, Steve said. Look at these offers. Technology sharing, territory council seats. They are offering us things that benefit them. They want us back to fix their problems. Is that not what they should offer? Jane asked. Steve shook his head. They should offer nothing. They should ask what we want. They should acknowledge that we left because they treated us poorly. But instead, they are negotiating like we are holding their civilization hostage. They still see this as a transaction, not a relationship. Back on Centrum, Councillor Ixvara was conducting an investigation into humanity's true role in Council operations. She had assembled a team of researchers to dig through records and find every human contribution. What they discovered was shocking. The Jumpgate network that connected hundreds of star systems had been maintained primarily by human engineers. The translation software that allowed thousands of languages to be understood in real time had been developed and continuously updated by human linguists. The emergency response protocols that saved lives during disasters had been written by human crisis management specialists. Humans had been involved in power generation, water purification, waste management, traffic control, food distribution, and 100 other essential systems. They had not controlled these systems, but they had been the ones who kept them running smoothly. They were the glue, Ixvara told High Chancellor Morthus in a private meeting. They held everything together, and we never noticed because they did it so well. Morthus looked at the report, his crystalline face reflecting the data in colored light. How could this happen? How could an entire species become this important without anyone knowing? Because they were humble, Ixvara said. They did not brag. They did not demand recognition. They just did the work, and we let them become invisible because it was convenient. The Chancellor stood and walked to the window. Outside Centrum was still struggling with weather failures. What do we do now? We learn to do it ourselves, Ixvara said, or we collapse. On the human colony ship Endeavour's Promise, Captain Victoria Hayes was conducting final checks before landing. She had been among the last humans to leave Earth's defensive perimeter, making sure every civilian ship escaped safely before following. Her executive officer, Commander Paul Rivers, stood beside her watching the planet below grow larger on the screen. It would be their home now, a world they would call New Victoria, after the captain who brought them here. Do you ever wonder if we made a mistake? Paul asked. We could have stayed. We could have demanded better treatment. Victoria considered the question. She was older than most of the evacuees, nearly 60, with grey hair and tired eyes. She had seen humanity's entire time in the Council. I watched us try that for 50 years, she said. We filed complaints. We requested meetings. We asked for recognition. Nothing changed. The Council species are not evil, Paul. They are just used to having us around. Like furniture. You do not think about furniture until it is gone. And now they are thinking about us, Paul said. Now they are thinking about what we did for them, Victoria corrected. That is different. They miss our labor, not our company. The ship shuddered slightly as it entered the atmosphere. Victoria sat in her command chair and gripped the armrests. After months of travel, they were finally home. In Council space. The situation continued to worsen, for species withdrew from the Council entirely, choosing to focus on their own survival. The Kelter Confederacy, the Prin Alliance, the Zex Collective, and the Nair Republic all announced they could no longer contribute to Council operations while dealing with internal crises. Trade routes collapsed without proper maintenance. Scientific collaboration ended because the shared research databases were offline. Border disputes erupted into open warfare without human diplomats there to mediate. Administrator Pelanax found himself managing a Centrum that was falling apart. The weather control was barely functional. Power outages were common. The water purification system was working at half capacity. Every day brought new failures. He stood in the empty human embassy again, a place he visited often now. Something about the abandoned building drew him. Perhaps it was guilt. Perhaps it was a desire to understand. In one office, he found something the cleaning crews had missed. A photograph, fallen behind a desk. It showed a human family, a man, a woman, and 2 children. They were smiling, standing in front of an alien landscape. On the back, someone had written words in human script. Pelanax took the photo to the translation office. The Quelni translator studied it and provided the meaning. Our first year on Rigel 4, we are home now. Those words hit Pelanax hard. Rigel 4 was not Earth. It was not humanity's homeworld. But this family had called it home. They had built a life there in Council space. And then they had left it all behind, because Council space had never really been their home. It had just been a place where they worked. Councillor Ixvara published her complete report on human contributions to Council civilization. The document was 3,000 pages long. It detailed every system, every project, every innovation that humans had been part of. The sheer scope of it was overwhelming. She presented it to the full Council assembly. The great chamber was silent as delegates read through the findings on their datapads. Many looked shocked. Some looked ashamed. We were warned, Ixvara said, her voice echoing in the chamber. 40 years ago, Ambassador Daniel Clark filed a report predicting exactly this situation. He warned that humanity was becoming the invisible workforce that kept everything running. He recommended distributing knowledge more widely and training other species. His report was marked as low priority. No council member ever read it. She paused, letting that sink in. The humans did not betray us. They did not sabotage us. They simply stopped doing work that we had taken for granted. This crisis is our own fault. We used them and ignored them, and now we are paying the price. High Chancellor Mortha stood. Then we must find them and bring them back. Why would they come back? Ixavara asked. We offer them things we think they want, but we have not asked what they actually want. We have not acknowledged how poorly we treated them. We negotiate like buyers at a market, not like people who owe an apology. The chamber fell silent again. The truth was uncomfortable, but impossible to deny. 6 months had passed since the evacuation. The Galactic Council had reached a breaking point. Species that had cooperated for centuries were now arguing over resources. Worlds that had traded freely now hoarded supplies. The unity that had made the Council strong was crumbling. High Chancellor Morthus called what he hoped would be a decisive meeting. The Council chamber was half empty. Many delegates had been recalled by their governments to deal with domestic problems. Those who remained looked tired and desperate. We must find the humans, Morthus declared. His crystalline body pulsed with agitated light. We must bring them back. I propose we offer them full council membership with voting rights. We offer technology exchanges. We offer them control of any uninhabited systems they want. Whatever price they name, we pay it. Ambassador Zeektha stood slowly. The Vryn diplomat had aged visibly in recent months. His blue skin looked pale, and his forearms moved with less energy than before. And what makes you think they will accept? They must, Morthus said. Look at what their absence has done. They must see that we need them. That is exactly why they will not come, Zeektha said quietly. We need them. But do we respect them? Do we value them? Or do we just want them to come back and fix our problems? Councillor Ixvara nodded in agreement. Ambassador Zeektha is right. For 50 years, we treated humans as servants, as a lesser species that existed to make our lives comfortable. Now we are offering them rewards, but only because we are desperate. That is not respect. That is manipulation. Then what do you suggest? Morthus demanded. I suggest we accept that they are gone, Ixvara said. We learn to function without them. We fix our own systems. We rebuild our own infrastructure. And perhaps, years from now, when we have proven that we can stand on our own, we might be worthy of asking them to rejoin us, as equals. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Species shouted at each other, blamed each other, demanded solutions that did not exist. The council had become a place of fear and anger, nothing like the cooperative body it had once been. In human space, life was very different. The colony world of New Terra had grown into a city of 500,000 people. Other human worlds reported similar success. New Victoria, New Boston, New Lagos, and dozens more. Each one thriving, each one independent. Governor Steve Matthews stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city. Buildings rose toward the sky, clean and new. Transport vehicles moved smoothly through the streets. Children played in parks where alien trees grew alongside plants from Earth. It is beautiful, said his assistant, Linda Harper. She had been with him since the evacuation, helping coordinate the massive relocation effort. It is ours, Steve said. That is what makes it beautiful. We built this, not for the council, not to maintain someone else's systems. We built it for ourselves. A message alert chimed on his datapad. Linda pulled it up and frowned. More transmissions from council space. They are getting more desperate. Steve did not even look at the messages anymore. Delete them, sir. This one is from Councillor X. She is not asking us to come back. She is asking permission to visit. That made Steve pause. He took the datapad and read the message carefully. Ixvara's words were different from the others. She was not offering rewards or making deals. She was asking to talk, to understand, to apologize. What do you think? Linda asked. Steve thought about it for a long time. Send a response. Tell her we will consider it, but not yet. We are not ready for visitors yet. On the military ship Defender's Pride, Admiral Jake Morrison reviewed the status of humanity's new defense fleet. The ships were impressive. Built with human technology, they were faster and more efficient than anything humanity had fielded while in the council. Commander Amy Fletcher brought him the latest intelligence report. Sir, our scout ships detected council exploration vessels in nearby systems. They are trying to find us. Jake studied the tactical display. The council ships were searching systematically, moving from system to system. They were still dozens of light years away, but they were getting closer. Let them look, Jake said. We are not hiding, but we are not making it easy either. What do we do if they find us? Amy asked. We greet them politely. We trade if the terms are fair, but we make it clear that we are not going back. Jake leaned back in his chair. This fleet exists to protect human interests, not council interests. That is a change that some of them will find hard to accept. Back on Centrum, the situation had stabilized slightly, not improved, but at least stopped getting worse. The weather control system was working at about 60% capacity. The power grid was reliable most days. Food production from agricultural worlds had leveled off at lower yields. The galaxy had not collapsed, but it had become smaller, harder, less comfortable. The easy abundance that council species had enjoyed was gone. Now they had to work harder for everything. Administrator Pelanax walked through the diplomatic quarter. Many embassies had closed. The Kelta Confederacy, the Prin Alliance, and others had withdrawn their staff. Their buildings stood empty, just like the human embassy. He paused outside the human building. It had become a strange sort of memorial. People came to look at it, to think about what had been lost. Some left flowers or gifts at the entrance. A spontaneous shrine to a species that had left without asking for anything. Pelanax entered the building with his security key. He had been inside dozens of times now. He had studied every room, trying to understand the humans who had worked here. He found their efficiency remarkable. Every office had been organized perfectly. Every system had been designed for maximum productivity. In the ambassador's office, he found something new. A small box, tucked in a drawer he had not opened before. Inside were commendations and awards. Human diplomats had been honored by a dozen different species for their service. Certificates of appreciation for solving disputes, for organizing relief efforts, for teaching and training. All of these honors, hidden away in a drawer. The humans had not displayed them. They had not used them to demand better treatment. They had just put them away and kept working. Pelanax sat at the ambassador's desk and felt something he had not expected. Shame, deep, painful shame for how his people had treated these hardworking, humble beings. Counselor Ixvera was conducting another investigation. This time, she was looking for any information about where the humans had gone. She had a team of analysts studying every piece of data humanity had left behind. They falsified their navigation records, reported her lead analyst, a Then named Corvel. Every star chart they filed with the council was slightly wrong, coordinates off by small amounts, enough to lead searchers to empty systems. How long have they been doing this? Ixvara asked. Years, decades, possibly. They have been planning this evacuation for a very long time. Corvel pulled up more data. They also established false trails, fake communication relays that lead nowhere, sensor beacons that broadcast false signals. Ixvara felt a mixture of admiration and sadness. Humanity had been so thorough. They had planned every detail of their departure, making sure they could leave cleanly and not be followed. That level of planning meant this was not a sudden decision. They had been thinking about leaving for a long time. Why did we not see it? She asked quietly. Because we were not looking, Corvel said. We thought they would always be here. In the Great Council chamber, a new reality was setting in. Species were adapting. The Then Dominion had trained new military technicians and slowly brought their fleet back online. The Varin Collective had rebuilt parts of their communication network using simpler but more reliable technology. Agricultural worlds had developed new farming techniques that did not rely on human supplements. That it was working slowly. The council was learning to function without humanity. But everything was harder now. Everything took more effort, and the easy cooperation that had once existed was gone, replaced by competition and distrust. That High Chancellor Morthus stood before the council and made a surprising announcement. I am resigning my position. The crisis we face is partly my fault. I failed to see how dependent we had become on human labor. I failed to value their contributions. Someone else must lead us forward. The chamber was silent. Then, one by one, delegates stood in respect. Morthus had admitted fault. That was rare among council leadership. Councillor Ixvara was elected the new High Chancellor. Her first act was to establish a new policy. No species in the council will ever again be taken for granted. We will document all contributions. We will train redundant staff for all critical systems. We will make sure that no single species becomes invisible again. It was a good policy, but it came too late to bring back the humans. 2 years had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council. The galaxy had changed in ways both visible and invisible. The council still existed, but it was smaller now, more careful, more aware of its limitations. High Chancellor Ixvara stood before a gathering of young students from a dozen different species. She had started these education programs to teach the next generation about the mistakes of the past. "Today, I want to tell you about the humans," she said. "They lived among us for 50 years. They worked on our ships, in our hospitals, on our farms, and in our cities. They made our lives better in 1,000 ways. And we never said thank you." A young Quelny student raised a tentacle. "Why did they leave?" "Because we took them for granted," HFY said simply. "We treated them as servants, not as partners. We used their skills but never acknowledged their value. Eventually, they decided they deserved better, and they were right." Another student, a small Vrin, asked the question that everyone wondered. "Will they ever come back?" HFY smiled sadly. "I do not know, but if they do, it will be as equals or not at all. That is the lesson we must learn." The council had adapted to life without humanity. The communication network now ran at about 70% of its old capacity. Food production had stabilized at lower levels. Medical care had returned to species-specific treatments, which meant more hospitals and more specialized staff. But it worked. The galaxy had not collapsed. It had simply become less comfortable. Some species had learned from the experience. The Then Dominion now trained engineers to work on every critical system, with detailed documentation of every process. The Vrin Collective had established apprenticeship programs where senior technicians taught younger ones, making sure knowledge was never held by just a few individuals. Other species remained bitter. The Kelta Confederacy still blamed humanity for abandoning the Council. They refused to acknowledge their own role in creating the situation. Their economy had suffered the most, and they wanted someone to blame. On New Terra, the human colony had grown into a proper city. Governor Steve Matthews walked through streets filled with people, shops, schools, and parks. Above, spacecraft came and went from the orbital station. Humanity was thriving. "Governor, we have a situation," said Linda Harper, finding him at a cafe. "A council ship just entered our system. They are broadcasting a request to talk." Steve put down his coffee. "What kind of ship?" "Diplomatic vessel. Small, unarmed. They are requesting permission to approach the planet." Linda handed him a datapad. "The message is from High Chancellor HFY herself. She is asking to meet with you personally." Steve read the message. It was respectful, humble even. HFY was not demanding. She was asking. That was different from the messages he had deleted 2 years ago. "Tell them they have permission to approach, but just their shuttle. The main ship stays in orbit." Steve stood up. "And Linda, assemble a welcome committee. If they came all this way, we should at least be polite." 3 hours later, Steve stood in the landing area watching a council shuttle descend. It was strange to see alien technology here, on a human world. For 2 years, they had been alone. Now the outside galaxy was arriving. The shuttle landed gently. The hatch opened, and High Chancellor HFY emerged. She was alone except for one aide. No guards, no entourage. That was a sign of trust, Steve realized. Or possibly desperation, Governor Matthews HFY said, approaching with her hands visible in a gesture of peace. "Thank you for seeing me." "Hi, Chancellor," Steve replied. "Welcome to New Terra. You have come a long way." "I have," HFY agreed. "May we talk?" Steve led her to a conference room in the government building. Through the windows, HFY could see the human city spreading out below. Clean, organized, thriving. A monument to what humanity could accomplish when working for themselves. "Your people have built something impressive," HFY said. "We have built a home," Steve replied. "Something we never really had in council space." HFY nodded slowly. "I understand now. Too late, but I understand." She pulled out a datapad. "I am not here to ask you to return. I am here to apologize." Steve raised an eyebrow. "Apologize?" "For 50 years, the council treated humanity poorly. We used your skills. We depended on your labor, and we never acknowledged your value. We were comfortable, and we did not want to see what made us comfortable." HFY looked directly at Steve. "I am sorry. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I apologize for our failure to treat you as equals." Steve was quiet for a long moment. "That is the first time any council species has apologized to us. It should have been the first thing we said when you left," HFY replied. "Instead, we spent months trying to bribe you to come back. We offered you everything except the one thing you wanted. Respect. What changed?" Steve asked. "We learned to survive without you. It was hard, but we managed. And in learning to do your work, we finally understood how much work it was, how skilled you had to be, how much you contributed." HFY set down her datapad. "I am not here to negotiate. I am here to listen. If you want to tell me why you left, I will listen. If you want to yell at me for how poorly we treated you, I will listen. You deserve to be heard. Steve leaned back in his chair. He thought about 50 years of service, 50 years of being ignored, 50 years of watching human contributions be dismissed or forgotten. We left because we were tired, he said finally. Tired of being invisible, tired of fixing problems and never being thanked, tired of working twice as hard to be seen as half as good. We did not hate you, we were just exhausted. Ixvara nodded. I have read every report humanity filed during your time in the Council. Thousands of reports. Detailed, careful, thorough. Almost none of them were ever read by Council members. Your ambassador, Daniel Clark, warned us 40 years ago that we were becoming too dependent on human labor. We marked his report as low priority and forgot about it. We know, Steve said. We kept copies of everything. Of course you did, Ixvara said with a sad smile. Humans are thorough. That is one of the things we took for granted. Far across human space, Admiral Jake Morrison was dealing with a different Council contact. A Then military ship had been found drifting near human territory, damaged and leaking atmosphere. Human patrol ships had rescued the crew and brought them to a nearby station for medical treatment. How are our guests? Jake asked the station commander, Captain Helen Foster. Grateful and confused, Helen replied. They expected us to demand payment for the rescue. When we told them it was free, they did not believe us. Jake shook his head. Did you explain that we help people in distress regardless of who they are? I tried. I do not think they understood. In Council space, everything is a transaction now. Helen pulled up a report. The ship's captain asked to speak with you personally. She wants to thank you. Jake met with Commander Vexler in the station's medical bay. The Then officer was recovering from decompression injuries, but she insisted on standing to greet him. Admiral Morrison, she said, my crew and I owe you our lives. Name your price. There is no price, Jake said. You needed help. We provided it. That is enough. Vexler looked confused. But surely you want something. Information about Council space. Technology. Credits. We want you to recover and go home safely, Jake said. That is all. The Then commander sat down slowly, wincing from her injuries. I do not understand humans. We treated you poorly for decades. Now you save our lives and ask for nothing. Why? Because it is the right thing to do, Jake said simply. We did not leave Council space because we hate other species. We left because we wanted to be treated as equals. That does not mean we stopped caring about other people. Back on New Terra, Steve and Ixvara talked for hours. She asked questions about human culture, human history, human motivations. She wanted to understand what the Council had missed for 50 years. Will you ever consider rejoining the Council? Ixvara asked finally. Steve thought carefully before answering. Not as it exists now. The Council is built on hierarchy. Some species are more important than others. Some voices matter more. Humans would always be at the bottom of that hierarchy because we are not flashy. We do not make grand speeches or impressive displays. We just work. What would need to change? Ixvara asked. Everything, Steve said honestly. The Council would need to value contribution over spectacle. It would need to listen to quiet voices, not just loud ones. It would need to be a true partnership, not a competition for status. Ixvara nodded slowly. That would require rebuilding the Council from the ground up. Yes, Steve agreed. Which is why I think it will not happen. Species do not change that easily. Perhaps not, Ixvara said. But I will try. I owe you that much. On Earth, now the capital of human space, a memorial was being built. It honored the 50 years humanity spent in the Galactic Council. It listed every human who had worked in Council space. Every contribution they had made. Every problem they had solved. A young woman named Kelly Roberts stood looking at the memorial construction. She was 19, born the year before the evacuation. She had no memory of Council space, no connection to the aliens her parents had worked with. What do you think of it? Asked her friend Danny Wright. I think it is important to remember,